Memoirs of the Life of the Reverend John Newton, by the Reverend Richard Cecil, A.M. A few articles may be added to this account from the narrative, where we find that his pious mother stored his memory with whole chapters, and smaller portions of scripture, catechisms, hymns, and poems, and often commended him with prayers and tears to God. Also, that in his 6th year he began to learn Latin, though the intended plan of his education was soon broken, and that he lost this valuable parent. July 11, 1732. We also find that, after his father's second marriage, he was sent to the school above mentioned, and in the last of the 2 years he spent there, a new usher came, who, observing and suiting his temper, he prosecuted Latin with great eagerness, and before he was 10 years old he had reached and maintained the first post in the 2nd class, which, in that school, was Tully and Virgil. But by being pushed forward too fast, and not properly grounded, a method too common in inferior schools, he soon lost all he had learned. In the next and most remarkable period of Mr. Newton's life, we must be conducted by the narrative above mentioned. It has been observed that at 11 years of age he was taken by his father to sea. His father was a man of remarkably good sense and great knowledge of the world. He took much care of his son's morals, but could not supply a mother's part. The father had been educated at a Jesuits' college, near Seville in Spain, and had an air of such distance and severity in his carriage as discouraged his son, who always was in fear when before him, and which deprived him of that influence he might otherwise have had. From this time to the year 1742, Mr. Newton made several voyages, but at considerable intervals. These intervals were chiefly spent in the country, excepting a few months in his 15th year, when he was placed with a very advantageous prospect, at Alicante, already mentioned. About this period of his life, with a temper and conduct exceedingly various, he was often disturbed with religious convictions, and being from a child fond of reading, he met with Bennet's Christian Oratory, and though he understood little of it, the course of life it recommended appeared very desirable. He therefore began to pray, to read the scriptures, to keep a diary, and thought himself religious, but soon became weary of it, and gave it up. He then learned to curse and to blaspheme, and was exceedingly wicked when out of the view of his parents, though at so early a period. Upon his being thrown from a horse near a dangerous hedgerow, newly cut, his conscience suggested to him the dreadful consequences of appearing in such a state before God. This put him, though but for a time, upon breaking off his profane practices, but the consequence of these struggles between sin and conscience was that on every relapse he sunk into still greater depths of wickedness. He was roused again by the loss of a companion, who had agreed to go with him one Sunday on board a man of war. Mr. Newton providentially coming too late, the boat had gone without him, and was overset, by which his companion and several others were drowned. He was exceedingly affected at the funeral of this companion, to think that by the delay of a few minutes, which at the time occasioned much anger, his life had been preserved, but this also was soon forgotten.